Hello and welcome to Honest Not Perfect with me, Amina Hanif, the Senior Content Manager at Source Fashion. So this episode is a little bit different, as you can probably tell, because we're going straight behind the scenes from our flagship event earlier this year. So over the 3 days, I was able to catch up with some of our incredible speakers. We talked about the themes that they explored on stage, but also I tried to push them a little bit further, tried to pick their brain a little on how we can really move towards a more ethical and sustainable future for fashion. In keeping with the theme of the podcast, these conversations are honest, challenging, and hopefully you'll agree they cover really, really meaningful topics. So we're here today. It's day 2 of Source Fashion. And we've got Isabelle with us. Welcome.
Thank you. So nice to be here.
Yeah. Well, Isabelle spoke earlier today on a panel, but I also wanted to delve a little bit into your brand and yourself because you've got a really lovely story. Can you give us a little bit of an introduction, if that's all right?
Sure. So I'm Isabelle, the founder of Isabelle Meira, and the brand as it's known today actually launched just 6 or 7 months ago now, but it rebranded out of a previous swimwear brand that I had for 4 years.
Okay.
It's all about sort of intentionally making products and just making beautiful, high quality pieces.
And so what was your real motivation in starting something like this?
To be honest, it was my time in the industry. So I worked as a buyer for 4 years and I just felt a bit frustrated by the industry by the end of it, and just the sheer amount of volumes and how much we were kind of producing but not really loving or truly believing in. It was just kind of making for making's sake sometimes. And so when I decided that I actually wanted to come out of the industry and start my own brand, I really wanted to do something that was just really intentional.
Yeah, and I love that story. I feel like I hear about this a lot, where people who've gone into retail with an idea of what their job might be, or feel that there's a level of influence or power that they can have on some of the garments that they're creating and some of the institutions they're working in, but then getting this kind of a bit disillusioned and a bit kind of fed up, and then going off and then doing their own thing and doing it the way they want to. And I think that's just such a great way to start a business.
Yeah, exactly. It's been a great journey, I must admit.
Yeah, so you specialise in swimwear.
Yes.
And so how does it compare to kind of other companies, and what's your kind of unique point, I guess?
So the unique point of Isabelle Meira is that it's timeless swimwear. So our customers literally bought things 5 years ago and they still wear them every single year and still love them, which is really lovely. And also lasting quality is a massive, massive thing. Okay. So it's really high quality fabrics, made in Bali in an exceptional factory. So yeah, we just really pride ourselves on actually investing in swimwear and reaping the rewards. It lasts for years.
Yeah, and is swimwear quite typically it doesn't last that long? Is that true? Or?
Yeah, so with lower quality swimwear, particularly with sort of the fabrics and the way that it's made up, it does have a definite impact on the longevity of it. If you think of swimwear, you know, you're putting it in chlorine, salt water, sunlight.
Washing it all the time.
Exactly. So it goes through so much as a garment, and people don't really realise how technical it needs to be.
Yeah, even putting it in that quick dryer thing at the swimming pool.
Oh my gosh, they're lethal, aren't they?
Like, that can't be good for the material.
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. And do you do cover-ups and stuff like that already, or that's something you're going into doing?
So we're going into it now.
Cool.
We're starting to do what's called the Edit by Isabelle Meira, and it's basically branded collaborations that we're doing. So something very new.
Oh, it's so exciting.
Very exciting.
Yeah, I'm so glad you're here.
Yeah.
I can talk about it. So on your session, you were talking a little bit about MOQs and the term and whether it's all outdated now. Why do you think that MOQs are such a sticking point within this industry, and maybe within ethical fashion specifically?
I just think so many manufacturers really stick to their MOQs, and it massively limits smaller businesses being able to come in and actually do good and change the industry. And it has been a stumbling block for us, particularly when we're trying to find new manufacturers. It's the first question that you ask, what's your MOQ?
Yeah.
So having somebody that's able to flex with that is massive.
Yeah. But I guess my question is, when I think about it, is that just not really difficult for the suppliers, basically? Because is that not just they only really deal in MOQs, or am I getting that wrong? I feel like I understand the point of view from an ethical point of view and from a brand point of view, but then from a supplier point of view, doesn't it make their lives quite difficult?
I don't know. I kind of get it in some ways, because it's much easier to have a line running all day rather than you making 100 pieces, changing the line, all the garment workers kind of working out how to make that garment, and it does take a lot of time. So I completely understand why a factory unfortunately would want a line full constantly, but I do think there is a big shift in what customers are wanting, and they're really loving getting behind small brands, knowing the stories, and just buying in something that they believe in.
And I guess maybe it's more about just having the conversations that this doesn't need to be the benchmark and the baseline MOQs, and then we go from there. It could be thinking about our quantities and thinking about our product lines in a completely different way. And maybe that's what we need to be doing. Sorry, that's more for me to kind of get my head around this. Do you feel that it's realistic that we can scale ethically, or I don't know why I said we, but can a brand scale ethically with low MOQs? And do you feel like that's realistic? Because I just feel like, would there be maybe some tension with whether it be with suppliers who are kind of, wanting to obviously produce more? There might be some tension with your consumers who they want more of the product. How can you kind of balance all of that and still grow and still be ethical?
I think it's a balancing act. I mean, anybody that goes into business, of course, they want their business to grow. But for me, I want my customers to stray away from fast fashion and buy more intentionally. So yes, I would of course like my quantities to increase over time, but not to the extent that I think a lot of the industry is working on, where there's a huge amount of wastage and they're buying into markdown. It's just actually intending to sell exactly what you're buying, rather than focusing on, well, we'll put it into markdown so it's fine and it's gone, because as we know, it doesn't just go. And
then I guess if you've already started with the intention and people have bought into your brand and kind of the ethos, then you can actually scale it up ethically, because everything you do will be with that in mind, and your kind of consumers already bought into that.
Exactly.
So I guess that does make sense. So just on that supplier angle, how do you contend with if there has been issues with or not issues, but conversations where a supplier said to you, like, look, I want you to make more of an order with me? Like, has that happened? And what do you do in that situation?
It hasn't, because I've always, like, as soon as I've worked with a supplier, I'm like, what's your MOQ, first of all? And if we can't work into it, there's no point in agreeing and saying, oh, it's fine, we'll work into it, because you just need to be realistic up front, basically. It's kind of, you're wasting your time, but you're also wasting your factory's time.
Do you feel like there was anything in the session today that you weren't able to add, or did you run out of time, or was there anything else you want to say that you could say here?
I feel like we could have gone on for hours, honestly. Like, there was so much to say. I think in general, it's just urging people not to be too afraid of MOQs. And I think sometimes, particularly if you're starting a business, you can sort of say, oh, okay, your MOQ is 200 pieces, off I go. And there is flexibility. And I guess it's just playing an importance on that relationship with your manufacturer, and there is give and take between you, and it's a relationship that you will grow with them. And that's such a really nice journey to be on.
And you can kind of challenge, I guess, all the benchmarks that have been put in place, but we need to start thinking a bit differently, I think. Cool. Well, I just wanted to ask a couple of questions about yourself, and kind of who's influenced you into going into the business. Do you feel how do you stay motivated in the fashion industry, when it can feel like it values things that are fast and cheap, or not it values, I guess, are the customers value that. I feel like we're having so many conversations about our consumers and them wanting to be more sustainable, but then you can't shy away from the fact that, people like Shein and Temu and TikTok Shop and whatever are really, profiting. So how do you, as a small brand and someone who's kind of entered into the industry with really good intentions, how do you stay motivated to kind of keep going, I guess, within all of this?
This is a good question. I think it's changed, honestly, over the years. When I first came into owning a business, I really led with sustainability as kind of a really big selling point. And over time, I think it's changed, because particularly within the swimwear industry, a lot of businesses are now sustainable. It's no longer a USP, but it's kind of like a very much done thing. So I have kind of had to pivot in terms of the way in which I've marketed the brand. I do think it's so frustrating, because we see so many stats that people are more interested in sustainability, yet we see all of these fast fashion giants, selling year on year, massive growth. And I think you just have to step away from it sometimes because it can be a lot. And equally, when you're looking at sustainability, I always think at every single business stage, what's the waste? What's the waste in, as manufacturing? Where are our offcuts going? What the factory doing about solar panels? And, all these things you can look into, but you can only really do the best that you can do.
Yeah.
And sometimes that is just the way that you gotta look at it, that you're doing more than others.
Yeah.
And that's good enough, and you're on the journey. So
well, I think that's a great answer, and it's a good one to end on.
Good.
So thank you so much. Thanks for being here today, and thanks for being part of Source Fashion.
yeah, thanks for having me. It's been great.
So we're back on site at Source Fashion. It's day 2, and I've been talking to some of the speakers who've been having sessions today, and I'm here with Hash. Welcome.
Thank you.
Would you like to give us a brief introduction about who you are, what you do?
Yes, I'm Hash Larder, and I'm the former CEO of Jigsaw, and prior to that I was also CEO of Warehouse.
Okay.
I was saying earlier on stage, it's just entering my 3rd decade in this industry, so quite some time.
Yeah.
But,
And so how did you start out in this industry?
As it happens, I worked on the shop floor at what was then the Burton Group, and then joined head office and worked my way through the ranks, as it were, in Arcadia. After that, I went to New Look, ASOS, then Aurora, where I was for 10 years, which owned Karen Millen Oasis Warehouse and Coast.
Okay.
And then I became CEO of Oasis and Warehouse before joining Jigsaw.
Amazing. So how was it kind of working your way in lots of different roles, I guess? What was that journey like?
I grew up, first of all, through the marketing route, so the brand marketing route. And then sort of switched over to digital in 2007 when I joined ASOS, and then was in much more sort of commercial and broader digital roles rather than the marketing roles.
Okay.
And then moved into general management.
Okay, quite a varied career.
Yeah, it's quite varied.
Yeah, amazing. So what was your session talking about today? Could you give us a little bit of a highlight of what it is that you discussed?
We were talking about leadership, and given that the last 10 years have been full of such turbulence, right the way back from 2016 and the Brexit vote, and business leaders having to navigate through that, then smack on into a global pandemic in 2020, and then the readjustment of that for the following 2 years to 2022. Then the fuel crisis and lots of stuff around the geopolitical crisis, inflation. That actually over the last decade, leaders have been firefighting a lot of their time, and I think one of the challenges that leaders face today is actually seeing more longer term views on smaller issues, obviously, and actually not thinking that everything requires the same firefighting that has happened in the last 10 years.
Yeah, you mentioned the term resilience. I feel like we hear this all the time, and I feel like it's really hard for, I'm not a business-minded person, I'm not very commercial. What does that really mean in a kind of a business context? What does that look like to have a resilient business?
Well, look, fundamentally, resilience is around, being able to adapt and change, but not fundamentally change the core of what you're doing. And resilience as an individual is, taking those knocks but overcoming them. Okay. And I think sometimes people mistake resilience as someone who can't show feeling. And I don't think that is, for me, certainly not what it means. You can have a bad day and you can be knocked off, and you can be annoyed with someone because they've said something, all of those things. Totally. But I think resilience is not something you measure on a daily basis, but over a longer term. And fundamentally, as we were talking about, a leader with empathy and a leader who has EQ, combined with resilience, generally does well.
Yeah, I guess is that something you feel that you can just pick up along the way? Is it a mixture of having had your own good leaders to kind of use as example? How does that? How do you become more like that? I guess
the fastest way of learning about leadership, in my view, is when you work for leaders who are not so good.
Okay,
because you learn how not to be. But of course, you do learn from brilliant leaders, and I hope most people have had them. I certainly have, and you pick up some of those traits. But fundamentally, it's about your own values. So if you can deploy what you've learned from good and bad leaders, and you can add in your own sort of ingredients to that, which is your authentic self, and with the rigor of intellect of running a business, then it should work out.
I love it. I want to work for you. So what do you think are some of the biggest mistakes that some leaders might make in a kind of uncertain world? Is there something that you've
I think
seen?
the biggest mistake any leader can make is assuming that they know it all.
Yeah.
So the biggest piece is, for me, there's no point in having a team unless you're going to consult them.
Yeah.
And, I've always used the leadership team when I've been CEO as my counsel because, fundamentally they're there for a reason and I prefer it when they have different views because it means that you can debate a topic or an issue or whatever it may be more extensively and then come to the right decision. Of course, if you are a CEO and MD, then the decision fundamentally is yours.
Yeah.
But using your team to get to the right answer rather than
Yeah.
assuming the right answer you
Yeah,
already knew.
because you can't. You're one person. You can't know everything. So why not lean on the people who are obviously in a position? They're at the top of their game. Hopefully, in a good position to give you advice.
Yeah,
So yeah, I
exactly
get that. So obviously, Source Fashion. We're all about ethical sourcing, ethical fashion, thinking about the world in a more circular way. I feel like when you are a leader who is kind of in very much looking at the commercial side of things, sometimes it feels like sustainability can become less of a priority. What advice can you give other leaders to kind of help them in kind of being able to balance both, I guess, those kind of very much real commercial priorities and the pressures they're feeling, as well as, very real, again, sustainability priorities?
Yeah. Look, I think if you have not signed up to sustainability objectives in your business, it is fine to not pay any attention to it. But if you have, and therefore you have added that as an ingredient to your brand narrative, it is then imperative that you follow through. Not for any other reason than because otherwise you will have lied to your consumers.
Yeah.
And you can't lie to consumers.
Yeah.
So yes, of course, there are commercial pressures which adapt your day-to-day route to the destination. But the destination shouldn't change.
Yeah.
And it is okay to adapt. And it is okay to take a slightly longer way around.
Yeah.
As we're finding, actually, look at all the countries in the world which are moving their net zero objectives on climate change, out from 2030.
Yeah.
It was easy to say in 2020 it's 2030.
Yeah.
But I do think people should be more realistic and have a longer term view on when these goals will be met. So I think when setting goals, be realistic so you don't have to keep moving them. And if there are things which happen along the way which don't particularly help the sustainability agenda or knock you off it, don't forget it is still your agenda.
Yeah.
So don't forget about it.
Yeah.
And I also think as the technology and the availability and our sourcing expertise all improves, the commercial and the sustainability goals will become more and more aligned rather than more and more disparate.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah. So you obviously have been, well, maybe not obviously, but I feel like you must have been in situations where very high pressure, you've probably been stressed. How do you as an individual deal with stress and difficulty?
I was not expecting you to ask that. But look, I think as you get older and you have more experience in your role, you fundamentally learn to cope with it in a different way. I would rather hope that nobody that has ever worked in my team would think that I'm outwardly a stressy person.
Yeah.
Yes, I might think thoughtfully on something, but I do keep things in check, which is, we are fortunate enough to work in the industry, work in businesses that we've all worked in, and so we're not saving lives, so let's keep it in check. But fundamentally, we're working hard.
Yeah.
And of course, sometimes things become a bit stressful, but we just have to keep a sense of realism and perspective on it and get on with the job in hand, because fretting will not solve the issue.
Yeah.
Action will.
Yeah. Great. And I guess my last question to you would be, if you had a message or a piece of advice that you would give to kind of the leaders within fashion at the moment and kind of what they're all dealing with, what would that message be? What should their focus be?
I think, it's not necessarily, I think it's to all people working in fashion.
Yeah.
I think, whether you're leading a business as the senior leader or you're the leadership team, or you're actually in the business as part of someone else's team, holding up the mirror as to what are we doing? Are we doing it right? Is it the most efficient way? Do the customers love it? Are we fixing real life problems? They are questions that everybody in an organisation should be asking one another.
Yeah.
And I think that is the right thing to do. I think, from a advice perspective on general commercial businesses, we need to remember that actually it's been turbulent for the last decade. I don't think the turbulence is going away, but it hopefully will get better. I think it is about remaining calm, but it is about taking long-term decisions and not just short-term wins, because the most resilient businesses, which will be the businesses which are setting themselves up for the 2030s, not for 2026, 27 and an operating plan. So I think long-term. It's about, I think, continuous incremental growth rather than a stellar year and a bad year, a stellar year and a bad year. So I think it is about being realistic in your planning, realistic in your goals, realistic in your timing, and then diligently getting on with it. And also the biggest thing is, don't forget the customer. They are rightfully so mindful, but they also have a lot of choice. And so they can go anywhere. Just you must give them a reason to come to you.
Make yourself stand out. I love it. Well, thank you so much, Hash. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
being here today. Thanks for being on the session and being part of Source Fashion.
Thank you very much.
Hello, welcome back. We're sadly at day 3 of Source Fashion, but I'm still grabbing speakers off the catwalk floor to talk to them about their session. So I have Ross Barry here with me. If you could please introduce yourself, that would be very helpful.
So I'm Ross Barry from Reskinned Resources.
And so you were just talking on the stage about returns. And are you able to give us a little bit of a highlight of what was discussed?
It was a really good panel because, there's different areas. So Reskinned works with brands and have kind of fell into the returns area, that we handle a lot of returns that the brands get, and obviously we try to help them get them sold and remonetized. Then you had, talk about size and, why do people return things? Obviously a lot of people think they're taller, shorter, thinner, fatter than they are, and that moved into people actually think they're going to look really good in a bright yellow shirt when maybe they're not. So it's just why people do, and then obviously it's like how do brands do it? And there's so many different companies out there with different strategies, but I think what came through was just like talk to consumer, know them, and put in certain steps so they actually buy the right thing, so they're not just buying it blind. And
from a brand's perspective, why do you think that returns are such a sticking point when it comes to kind of fashion waste, and why do you think that is?
I think there was an element that a lot of brands felt they had to give free returns, and kind of created their own monster that, people got so used to it and decided that they'd try on 20 different things and return 18, and now it's a case of, hang on, this is costing a lot of money, and we've got to try and reverse that behaviour without actually telling people off for doing what we've told them. So
because I think, just being from a consumer's perspective, I don't think I really realised the impact of returns. And do you think that brands are doing enough to communicate that well enough? I know that, as you said, so many brands offer free returns. So you do think it's just like, you don't really think about the environmental impact at all? No,
exactly. And I think a lot of brands, their ideally, it would come back, they'd check it and it'd be restocked. But, the reality doesn't always work like that. And the logistics side with, just putting it back on the shelf is so hard. And it can actually, end up being very, very expensive from that side. So, it's not an easy message to communicate. And really, why would you want to communicate that? But, when you talk to people and, explain it, they go, oh, yeah, well, that makes sense. And, it's just something you wouldn't consider. And when we sell online, if it is a return, we tell people, and they're like, oh, actually, I'm getting a bargain just because somebody's bought it before and didn't like it. So, they've got a feel-good factor there. So I think if you communicate it, people obviously understand how it happens, why it happens. It's just, getting them to know it.
I feel like the average consumer is quite reasonable. They would get it. So I saw that ASOS have been thinking about charging for returns. What are your thoughts on that as a model? Do you think that more brands should be doing that?
I think it would certainly make people stop and think whether they need to do it. And I know people have spoken about different ways of, either incentivising people not to send them back. So, like you get 5 coffees, you get 1 free if you don't return it after a certain period of time. And then on the stage actually was discussing, slightly naming and shaming. If somebody's a serial returner, they should be sort of like on the blacklist for all brands, which is interesting.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah,
wow.
that's quite
that would
extreme.
really stop me. I was speaking to a company yesterday, very small brand, and what they do, they have like an automatic blocking if you've done a certain number of returns. And they're saying they have a handful of customers where they would ordered like hundreds of pounds of worth of clothes, and they just had to block them completely. And I guess I think it's a similar thing that maybe all brands should think about doing something like that. I want to talk a little bit about sizing. I know that was discussed a little bit on stage. Have you seen the way that maybe AI or virtual try-on tools, have you seen that working well with any brands, or have you seen that a lot?
I haven't sort of come across it with the brands we work with that are using it, but I know a lot of people are looking at it and trialing it. And, this idea that you can, trial it virtually, you have your own avatar and measure yourself, and I can see it happening, but I think there's so many different apps out there that you can do it. People are just a bit like, well, I don't need to have one app for this brand, one app for that. So it will happen. Someone will come in front on the market, and that is obviously going to help things a lot.
I want to talk a little bit about the Reskinned business model. Could you take us through how that works and how you interact with brands?
Yep. So what we try and do is, help brands become more sustainable, which takes on various guises. But the main sort of project is, if they've got pre-loved clothing, EPR is going to mean you're going to have to be responsible for it end of life. So we offer facilities that their customers can return either their clothing or other people's. The incentive for the customer is that they will get a voucher to buy on a new purchase. So you've got that loyalty loop, and for a lot of brands, they don't have that direct interaction with their customer because it's sold for a third party, and then they suddenly start getting that, and there's the interaction. And then what we will try and do is obviously always try and promote reuse wherever possible. So we've got our own platform, and we also host stores on behalf of the brand with eBay.
Okay,
so
nice.
It's Reskinned X, whoever it happens to be. And again, we're finding that customers are beginning to know what the reskin model is in terms of taking it back, but also we're an approved outlet, so they know that you've got 30 days returned, it's been cleaned, it's been checked. So, they've got that assurance. It's not just like buying off somebody from Vinted or eBay that, a bedroom seller that they don't know. So we're finding our aim is to try and get people that perhaps wouldn't buy a pre-loved before, and they just want that little assurity. So the thing we always say is we're trying to make it the same, if not a better experience than buying new. And from the brand's point of view, we do a lot of the heavy lifting. It's something that's not easy to set up, especially if you're sort of like quite a big brand in a department. And then off the back of that, we look after the recycling, which is a sort of huge element of it. Because again, the brands don't have the experience there. It's a very much a volume-based business, so we aggregate it, and then we can start working with our partners to hopefully get to that, fibre to fibre, pre-consumer, post-consumer waste back into new clothing, which is something that the EU have legislated on and be coming in the next couple of years.
And so how does your recycling technology work? Is that in-house, or is it what happens with that?
So we've got the technology in-house that actually scans it and will let you know what the material content is. But what we do is, it's very specialist textile recycling, and I think a lot of people are under this illusion that you've got a machine that can pull denim, and then the next week you put shirts in it, and the next week it doesn't work like that. This is very expensive machinery that's very specialist. So we will partner with them, ensure we've got the feedstock, delivering it in the way they want, and from a brand's point of view, they've then got the transparency, because we will say, we can do it on a very, very sort of garment by garment basis. This garment was rejected, it's recycled because it's got this wrong with it, it's then been put with this stock that's gone in that bale that's been shipped at this point, and it's been recycled. So
okay, interesting. Yeah, it's a really cool business model, I think. And just to bring it back to the panel, what would be one thing that you'd like someone from the audience to take away from the panel?
I'm guessing if there's people there, it's just actually, returns is a problem for everyone, and everyone actually does have their part to play. So you can't just blame the retailer that you've decided that you're 5'10" and you're actually 5'5". So, think before you buy stuff. But then equally, the retailers have to appreciate sometimes they've got to give a little bit more information and maybe make it a little bit harder to return things for sort of no apparent reason.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Ross. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being part of Source Fashion.
Thank you so much.